Hello, my name's Karyn Ferguson, and I'm a Yorta Yorta woman from the Algabonyah region in northern Victoria. And before we start, I'd like to pay my respects to the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nations today, and also acknowledge the elders in the room, in our communities, and also all the Aboriginal people here today. I'm here in my role today as a community engagement worker within the Kaiela Institute, working in the Algabonyah data unit. But another role I have is as a research fellow at the University of Melbourne through the Posh Centre for Indigenous Health.
I'd also like to acknowledge the traditional owners and pay my respects to our elders. My name is Raelene Nixon. I belong to the Gungari people of southwest Queensland, but I have lived and worked on the Yorta Yorta country since 1998. I remember that date because that was Rumbalara's first premiership. I, like Karyn, have a number of hats, but I'm also here in my role as Community Engagement Officer for the data unit. I'm also a research fellow for POSH in my first year of a PhD, which is looking at how do we reposition the value, the social, cultural and economic value of Indigenous people in the Algabonyah region. So I'm going to start off by just giving a little bit of background of how we've been using data in Shepparton and on Yorta Yorta country, and then Karyn will talk about the data unit and the annual report card. So the pursuit of data sovereignty began with the Koori Resource and Information Centre. Oh, I've skipped a page, have I? And that was back in 1988, so the bicentennial year, and this was a way to disentangle ourselves from the welfare-dependent structures that were surrounding us. So with the Koori Resource and Information Centre, we had access to the community and to everything that was impacting us, but we also had the ability to do something about it. So on the side, you can see some of the infrastructure that's actually come out of the Koori Resource and Information Centre since 1988 to now, where we're in empowered communities and Algabonyah. So, we looked around and not all of our people had access or the ability to participate in sport. And we thought, well, what can we do about that? And we said, well, let's build our own sporting facilities. So we have a really successful football and netball club. And so another institute that's not there is the Academy of Sport, Health and Education. So recognising that education departments were failing us, not that our kids were failing, we got together and thought, well, what can we do about that? And what do we have control over? So we didn't have much control over the Department of Education. So we said, in the interim, let's build our own school. And out of that, we've built the Academy of Sport, Health and Education that is a pathway for kids that would otherwise be disengaged. So it starts with a plan. So what does happiness and health mean to us, and how do we measure success in pursuing this? This vision statement and the visual representation was developed at community meetings. It's a statement of purpose that was used during the process of establishing community governance structures for us. It represents walking in two worlds. So we are aspirational and we do pursue opportunity and capability so we can exercise choice. Sorry, I'm really nervous. At the same time, we know that it's important that we maintain our connection and our responsibility to our family and our community. So feeling that we are a part of and share in the symbols of national and state regional identity, but also are able to draw on our sense of identity from that community. Just as important as our strong roots in our law, so our land and our language, our connection and our culture. So we have been doing this work for a long time, and in 2006, then at the time it was called the Strategic Planning and Policy Unit, established this Aboriginal Community Facilitation Group, and we knew that there was an undercount in the ABS census, and we thought, well, let's put something in place to see if we can improve the number of people participating in the census. We decided after we got the results of that census, that there was probably still an undercount. So the Shepparton Policy and Planning Unit implemented a post enumeration survey of the ABS census for Shepparton and Mooroopna. So they undertook its own census, and from that they worked together with the University of Melbourne School of Rural Health and employed 12 local Indigenous Aboriginal community members to carry out that research. The results of that was there was about a 30% undercount in the ABS figures for our population, and that was with only 97% of the households agreeing to participate. So still working on using our own data, in 2009 we evaluated the Close the Gap. So what was closing the gap in Shepparton? So was it working? The then interim Community Planning Council developed a draft set of indicators to monitor the gap in the outcomes between Aboriginal people and the wider community in Shepparton. The results were published in a 2009 Close the Gap Shepparton report that is accessible online. As part of this work, workshops were held with members of the Aboriginal community representation from all levels of government, academic, non-government and community. So out of that, we looked at identifying data needs for us, for our community, determining what data already existed and identifying specific data initiatives both undertaken previously or proposed within our area. We identified the gaps in data and with that information considered strategies for procuring the required data in a timely and efficient manner. It was in 2009 in the community survey that we start to ask about what a community governance structure would look like. And at that time, the results, 98% of our community said that it was important that we have a regional governance body, but they were relatively split on what that would look like. So again, we're still gathering our own data. In 2014, we produce a report that revisits those indicators of Close the Gap. The report determined what data was publicly available to measure the progress since 2009. The data at that time focused on 10 domains and was using the ABS data. Basically what came out of that was the results indicated that there's very little usable data available at the local Aboriginal level for us to use. So the green dots up there are the only information that we actually had. I'll now pass you on to Karyn to talk about the Algabonyah data unit.
So with all that work predecessing and informing us about our data and what we need, the Algabonyah data unit has been established or is currently being established, and the rationale behind that that we really want to ensure that Aboriginal knowledge and the worldview is expressed through the research journey, and that the ability for Aboriginal knowledge to be embedded in a research project from inception right through to analysis, the interpretation and policy development, so that that data is really being put into use in our own community. So the principles around the data unit were developed by community through community consultations, and really a critical principle of the Algabonyah data unit is its role in protecting us from abuse and also from exploitation. And we've heard that across the 2 days about Aboriginal communities being exploited from unethical research. So we think it's important that we do it ourselves and have a real voice in that. Also, the data unit will assist in the sustainability of our culture and identity and ensure that our voice is put through research in all its stages. So the role of our data unit is fundamentally what we want to do is resource our community with knowledge, but in a sophisticated way as well. So basically what we want to do is measure the things that are important to us. So for us to identify what our priorities are. And we also want to look at things like measure the resource allocation and investment into our region, for example, the IAS funding, and that's an issue for a lot of communities around Australia, and also what the state government resourcing is for example, around infrastructure, like building new hospitals. So some of the benefits that we see coming out of the data unit would be that the data reflects community boundaries. So we're talking about Yorta Yorta people on Yorta Yorta country as opposed to local government boundaries and areas. Also that while we do have the quantitative data and access to those data sets, we'll provide the Aboriginal community lens that goes over the interpretation and the analysis to ensure that our voice is across data and research at all times. So what we're working on at the moment in the data unit through our community engagement team and with Jane Freemantle and the Kaiela Institute is reporting on the progress of our community through the annual report card. This information is across 6 domains. So those are the domains there, and they were identified by the community at a community meeting as what's important to our community. So there were 57 indicators, a really huge range of indicators that the community identified what was important to us, and through a thematic analysis we came up with those 6 domains. So currently, this is an example of sort of what we will be reporting on, which is the life course of an Aboriginal person and all the interventions that may occur to that person throughout their life and their journey and how that might impact on their health and well-being. So this is a really Western concept to us of what, through the iconography and the pictures. So what we're working to do is to really put our Indigenous perspective through that. So all those icons will be changed. So for example, with the baby, that would be perhaps a coolamon. So it becomes more relevant to us as people. We do have a video. Do we have time for that?
Yeah, Jen first.
Look, it's really lovely to have the opportunity to talk to you this afternoon. Auntie Rochelle, hi Auntie Rochelle, and to Jan Muir. And I particularly just wanted to ask you, why is it important to you that data that is about you is owned by you and used by you for the benefit within your community? Jen, why is this important to you?
Data is important to our communities, well, especially to my family, because I know where that data comes from. I know that the data's not embellished in any way. It's a true reflection of my community and the family who live in that community. And I know that I can have access to that data, and I know that the data's interpreted, and it'll be interpreted by Aboriginal people within the community. I think it's important that we have that kind of ownership, because that really reflects our self-determination and management around the evidence that's gathered about us. And not to the community. Yeah.
So the data is sometimes used in the wrong way?
Yes.
And not used for the benefit of the community?
Yeah. And I think there's too much emphasis on evidence-based data. Unless someone has written it and published it in, some kind of document, then it's not really true evidence, as say. But if we talk about information that we know that we've experienced, well, that's first-hand knowledge about evidence. It's not a theory. It was someone's theory about.
It's reality. It's lived experience. And I think that with the data unit that is being set up, what we're doing is actually bringing in both. So we've got the information that comes from statistical and administrative data sets, but what we've also got, really importantly, is the voice of the community. So the voice of the community telling us, what do these data actually mean? and getting them to interpret what the data mean for them. Do you want to kind of comment on the importance of the community voice in saying what's best for their community?
I think it's important that we have different voices that are able to interpret data to suit their own perspective or their own knowledge or experience, and how that's represented. It's important that they have some kind of ownership over it, and not only ownership but the look of it. Because in our, as we say in our community, that we're sick to death of being researched and data, the evidence thrown around the community about how poorly we're faring as a nation of people. But the reality is that sometimes our family, we've survived, isn't it? That survival is really important to us, and there's that's an important part, not the deficits or the illness that I may have, but the fact that I'm still here as an Aboriginal person.
Yeah.
I suppose it'd be the same for you, like living in the bush and experiencing, the everything that's around you. I mean, you don't go and write everything up, but you know
what's going on around. Yeah.
And actually being out there makes you well.
Makes you well, makes you aware of things, and makes you aware of what the birds are doing and even saying. But close to everyone out the bush there. They all know me.
I bet they do. Well, look, thank you so much. As I say, the data unit that we're setting up is really part of ensuring that data that is about Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people is actually owned by them, that is actually organised by them, that is actually used by them for their own benefit. And it's not something that's being dictated to by government or by other organisations, but being by the Aboriginal people themselves, saying this is the area where we need to put our initiatives and incentives, and we've got the basic data that will then be able to show whether that's made a difference or not.
I think the important part is that we have ownership and control over the look, the feel, and the evidence that's been gathered. As I said before, self-determination is an important component of our survival, and unless we have that that notion built into whoever's gathering the data, and that person who's gathering the data recognises that, then I think we're on the right track.
Yeah, I think it's about time we look after our own business, just data.
So that was Auntie Rochelle Patton and Auntie Jane Muir from Shepparton. Just before we finish up today, we believe that we're doing a good job on Yorta Yorta country, and if you've been inspired by it or you want to be a part of it, then Google Rumballara Football Netball Club and become a member for 2018. Thank you.